Mewtwo Y is coming to Pokemon Unite very soon. Mewtwo Y, because I said so, that joke will never get old to me and only me. Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, let's talk about everything you need to know about Mewtwo Y. Unlike Mewtwo X, Mewtwo Y is an attacker. It attacks at range and is special attack based. We can assume that items like Slick Spoon, Wise Glasses, Choice Specs, and many other special attack items will do pretty well on this Pokemon. Mewtwo Y performs pretty similarly to Mewtwo X at the start. Barrier does basically the same thing, so does Confusion, a little bit of a stun right there. But of course, as you can see, we are attacking at range with Mewtwo Y. That is one of the biggest differences between these two Pokemon, and of course, how some of the moves work given that you are fighting at range. Just like Mewtwo X, when you fill your pressure gauge by hitting opponents, you will Mega into Mewtwo Y. Just like Mewtwo X, you fill your pressure gauge and you Mega into Mewtwo Y by hitting your opponents with your basic attacks. You'll notice that not only do your attacks do more damage because you've got increased special attack, you also attack in an area effect around you. So you hit multiple enemies at the same time once you have Mega evolved with your basic attacks. All of your moves work a little differently with Mewtwo Y than they do with Mewtwo X. So Mewtwo Y's teleport is actually 2 teleports in one, which is pretty incredible. You're able to dash twice with this. This is obviously set up to be able to chase down some of your opponents with your ranged attacks, or keep yourself at extreme range while you are lobbing damage at your enemies. Your basic attacks, as you can see, do 340 damage. After you teleport, the damage is increased to 411. Just like Mewtwo X, you deal increased damage after you teleport, but not actually after your second teleport, interestingly enough. If I could show that correctly right here, wait for your second teleport, and you've gone back down to your regular attack damage right there. So the burst that you get from your attack is after your first teleport. The second is probably going to be used more to chase if you've got a good situation, or to run away if you're in a lot of trouble. Given the fact that you have 2 teleports and you can use an eject button, you can clear an insane amount of distance very, very fast with Mewtwo Y. You can dash, and go. I mean, you are gone with this Pokemon. Gone. Mewtwo Y's Future Sight works a little differently. Rather than pulling enemies towards you, you actually push them away from you and stun. This, again, is just based on how Mewtwo Y is completely set up to keep distance from your opponents when you don't want to be there, so you can continue lobbing damage at them. Still a very good attack, but just a complete different setup for Mewtwo. Future Sight works very similarly. The locked on Pokemon will actually take additional damage as you hit them, and then a burst of damage will happen at the end of it. Inside the public test server, Mewtwo Y's max damage, as well as Mewtwo X, has been nerfed, and it is capped at 2,000 from Future Sight. Future Sight not only will stun, it also does briefly reduce the move speed of the Pokemon that it hits. Teleport not only gives you increased damage, but it also increases the rate at which you gain your Mega gauge from hitting enemies, so it's just easier to gain Megas when you are using Teleport, and it's easier to do a ton of damage. Dance around the enemies, Mewtwo! Psystrike works a little differently on Mewtwo Y. When you're close to the opposing Pokemon, you can see I do 307 damage per tick and then 984 at the end. As I back up, I'm actually doing more, 373 and then 1253. You do more damage to targets further away with your Psystrike on Mewtwo Y. You are still unstoppable when you use this move, so it's a great way to get out of situations where an enemy would stun you, and at the same time, it still decreases enemy move speed. Mewtwo Y's recover is actually quite different here. Mewtwo Y actually recovers damage based on the amount of damage you do while you are using recover, which I think is a really cool way to use this move differently on this Pokemon. As you back up, you can see the amount of basically lifesteal that I'm getting on all of those attacks I'm hitting Snorlax with. Recover also does another couple cool things. So after I use Psystrike right here and I use recover, after a set amount of time, recover stops, and you can see my move cooldown sort of tick up right there. So you get a reduction in your moves after your recover shield is done for a moment there. Also, when you use recover, you'll notice this is different from Mewtwo X. You can see recover and then look at my pressure gauge under my health. I'm actually able to charge my pressure gauge, not attacking any enemy Pokemon. This is going to put you in situations where you can move around the map using recover, getting yourself set up for a big fight so your pressure gauge is already high when you encounter your opponents. That way it'll be a lot easier to mega with Mewtwo Y. It's going to be really interesting to use this. Obviously, the correct way that you're going to want to use recover with Mewtwo Y is to already walk into a big fight, like one hit away from your mega gauge so that you can move right in as Mega Mewtwo Y. Psystrike Plus is just going to increase the move speed decrease. Boy, that's a weird way to word that, but you're going to increase the amount of move speed decretions that you're giving to your opponents. I did even worse the second time, but you get what I'm saying. Then the plus version of recover is going to give you increased amount of health recovery on your attacks that you use while recover is active. So you're going to kind of put yourself in these crazy situations and you're going to recover a ton of HP as you are fighting. It should be noted, like Mewtwo X and kind of like a Pokemon like Inteleon, you're a special attacker, but you are critically hitting with Mewtwo Y. As we saw on Inteleon, that probably does not mean that you're going to be using an item like a scope lens, but it is interesting to note that this Pokemon critically hits with its basic attacks, and a lot of its damage is going to come from its basics. It's very possible that attack speed, things like rapid fire scarf, might actually be pretty useful on this Pokemon because it's going to function a lot like a Cinderace or a Duraludon, just a special attack version of that with all the crazy Mewtwo moves that it will have. In case you were wondering, your Unite move for Mewtwo Y is exactly the same as it is for Mewtwo X. It is this global ultimate move that lets you deal damage somewhere on the map where the enemy Pokemon is. It rains down on top of them and stuns them while dealing damage here. I've noticed that it feels like you're doing a little more damage with this move than you are with Mewtwo X, but at the same time, I'm also wondering if that has anything to do with the fact that you're probably going to be running a Slick Spoon on this Pokemon, so you're going to deal a little more damage with its Unite move. Everything else about the Unite move is the same for Mewtwo X and Y. Speaking of Mewtwo X and Y, I'm sure you're wondering, Jake, how are you so cool? Come on, stop it. You're just flattering me. But you also might be wondering, can Mewtwo X and Y be on the same team? As of right now, Mewtwo X and Y cannot be on the same team. So if you have one, you cannot have the other, which is good because imagine looking across the field and seeing two Mewtwo's on the enemy team. Mewtwo Y has been nerfed more than Mewtwo X on the public test server, so we can only hope that this release is a little less powerful than Mewtwo X. Speaking of power, let's talk about some items that could make this Pokemon very, very strong. I think Slick Spoon is going to be pretty much a given for this Pokemon. It is on most special attackers. Also, things like Wise Glasses and Choice Specs could be very, very good for Mewtwo. The game has a few recommended item setups that I think are interesting to look at right here. The first one being Muscle Band, Scope Lens, Rapid Fire Scarf. So it's possible you could treat this Pokemon just like an AD carry, like a Cinderace or a Duraludon, and it's also possible that you might do something like the build below, where you stack special attack specs. Obviously, everything about this Pokemon is going to be based around special attack, so you might get a ton of value from that. Given how Inteleon worked with its Scope Lens, I might warn against playing Scope Lens on this Pokemon, but we will know all about this Pokemon's stats once it actually releases inside the game. And just like held items, while we won't know exactly what boost emblems are going to look like on this Pokemon until it comes out, I just wanted to play around with something kind of fun right here. What we see is a white-green setup with 3 red. This gives you some extra special attack, some extra HP. You lose attack and special defense, but you also get a little extra critical hit rate from it. The question really will be, will red help at all? If red doesn't help at all, you would drop that and you would run something else. But I thought it was just fun to kind of play around with a possible emblem setup for Mewtwo. Of course, things like green, white, and green, black look to be pretty good on a Pokemon like this. It's also possible, depending on how its attack speed works out, that you may see a higher attack speed emblem setup for this Pokemon. But I think it's very likely that you're going to want to lean into special attack damage. So there you go. I think that's about everything you need to know about Mewtwo Y before it comes to Pokemon Unite. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, if this helped you, drop a like, drop a comment, drop a subscribe. I love you, and I will see you all next time.